Hello, everyone. So I'm George from Ireland, and today is a magnificent day for Ireland as we can remember perhaps the most innovative and audacious writer. That's James Joyce, who was one of the most daring and creative writers in any language, in any epoch, because today is Bloomsday, it being the 16th of June, because his most celebrated novel, Ulysses, was set upon the 16th of June, 1904, set in Dublin, which was Joyce's birthplace, where Joyce lived to the age of 20, though he soon left and he almost never returned, spending his adult years in Trieste, Zurich, Paris, and briefly London, dying indeed in Switzerland. You might have seen my video last July when I visited his final resting place. So Ulysses is his magnum opus, and it tells a story of a fictive character, Leopold Bloom, who, highly unusually for an Irishman, is Jewish, and the goings on in his life. But anyway, it's oh my goodness, I've forgotten that word. It'll come to me when there's a story on two levels, like Animal Farm, for example. That it's a straightforward tale of what's happening in Dublin, but it's also subtly retelling, as in the Greek epic of the Odyssey. I think it skips out the Iliad. I've only read parts of it, but about what they're eating and so on. There's a one-eyed man, he represents the Cyclops, and when various stones are lobbed at them, that represents some in a pub when people are throwing beer glasses and things like that. So the characters you meet along the way are like that. I can't, for the life of me, recall that word. I'm so embarrassed. This literary terminology has slipped my mind, but it'll come back to me. Like when it's like analogous, when on one level there's the ordinary story, but on a more profound level, it's telling something else. Does it begin with P? Because it's not parable, but I can't recall it. Anyway, and a lot of it is about physical action, a bit of vulgarity, about bodily functions and so on. So some people thought it was a filthy book. It was banned in the Republic of Ireland. It was banned in many countries. It was banned in 1922. When 1922 it was published, and we established the Irish Free State, but it was quickly forbidden, banned by a judge called Lennon. And then Joyce, he later wrote in a map of Ireland, Hic sunt Lennones, as in here are Lennons. So it was published by Shakespeare and Company in Paris, because they're just beside Notre Dame, and I think I filmed outside that bookshop, because France was delightfully libertarian about literary works, but the new Irish state, we were going to be holier than the Vatican, really, and we couldn't have any smut, anything that would lead to decadence, and this was going to lead to supposedly degradation of our culture, polluting it with these vulgarities. And now there was censorship everywhere. In the United Kingdom, likewise. In the United States, supposedly the land of the free, when they got that First Amendment about freedom of expression, even then, this was thought to be causing outraging public decency. So copies were impounded, pulped, and so on. But it wasn't until much later, decades later, really, the 60s, these things were allowed in the United States. In the UK, the Lady Chatterley trial, and in the Republic of Ireland, we eventually got rid of our index of prohibited books, and the committee which decided whether books were forbidden or not included clergymen, mostly Catholic priests. There was all be at least one clergyman of a reformed denomination. So Joyce, he's someone who only just wrote a very few books. Well, wrote his volume of poems, Chamber Music. He wrote that one play, Exiles, and of course he was self-exiled from Hibernia most of his life. And A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which I first perused when I was 16, was transfixed by it, quite close to the age that he was when much of the action is taking place. But he worked and reworked these books over decades to make sure that they're absolutely flawless, they're just unimprovable. And one of my very first videos on this channel was about that, almost 5 years ago to this day. So what else did he write? Well, obviously Finnegan's Wake, which is written in dream language and has got one sentence which is like hundreds of words long or crammed together, no capitals, no punctuation. So it's just impenetrable. Some would say turgid. This is just ridiculous. The purpose of language is to communicate, and he was seemingly trying to obfuscate and necessarily their miscomprehension. So he would drop in allusions to classical literature and words in various languages, including ancient Greek. So it's meant to be impossible to understand. Is that the idea? Was this just too ostentatious? He didn't bear his erudition lightly, so it appears. So he's not to everybody's taste, but he was definitely different, a modernist, found his own man, because the plot mattered less than the characterization and so on. So he was quite anti-establishment, though he wasn't political per se. I don't think he was a pacifist, but really wanted no part of the Great War. Wasn't exactly an Irish nationalist. Didn't want to be part of the United Kingdom either. He despised the Roman Catholic Church, in which he was brought up. Would very much have said "écraser l'enfant," the kind of thing would have liked about France, it being a secular country. And so, actually, curiously enough, 1904, the year that Ulysses is set, is when France actually began its laïcité. So he was living in Paris in the early stages of the Second World War. He went to Switzerland for an eye operation, which went wrong, and he died there. So he's buried there just beside Zurich Zoo. Well, what else can I say? I warmly recommend it to you. So it's fast moving. It's richly described, because although some people thought he was a bit too much of a show off about his learning, at the same time the vocabulary is sparse sometimes. But he's obviously thought about it very, very carefully. He often doesn't have quotation marks for the dialogue, and so he doesn't use too many words. It's not overly complicated in that way, and he very closely observed the cadences and the colloquialisms of Dublin speech, particularly vernacular Dublin speech, though he's very much bourgeois himself. So it's fabulous like that. It's extremely vivid and evocative. So I most warmly recommend this work of his to you, as I would really all the others. So I've read chamber music and poems penny each, and he often deliberately misspelt things because he was fluent in a number of languages. He'd read languages at University College Dublin, like French and Italian. And in Exiles, there's a bit of the dialogues actually in Italian, like su and giù. He learnt Norwegian to be able to correspond with Ibsen. He was having articles published in literary magazines from the age of 17, but a lot of his juvenilia hasn't survived to this day. So he's one of Ireland's towering geniuses. We're supposed to be an island of saints and scholars. Well, he certainly wasn't a saint, and he lived in sin with Nora Barnacle, his portable island, for decades till they regularised their situation in the 1930s. But he had 2 children. And the eldest one, George, but didn't he have some foreign version of the name George? Giorgio, I think the Italian name, born in Trieste, which is then part of Austria-Hungary, now part of Italy, but with a large Italian community there. And his daughter, Lucia, who was afflicted by mental illness, actually died in Northampton, United Kingdom. So there's a memorial service going on for Bloomsday at her grave. On the bucket list for me is to actually be in Ballia for Bloomsday one day, maybe next year, please God, if this terrible situation ever comes around. So he's a man of many parts. He helped found the very first cinema in Ireland. He knew a lot of other literary figures when he was living in Paris. His daughter dated Samuel Beckett, another very well-known Irish writer. So although Joyce's oeuvre is not enormous, it is peerless. Anyway, that's enough for Bloomsday. I so want to go around because these are real sites, and the part of the reason that the characters were so well fleshed out is mostly they're based on real people, sometimes a composite, and that's also true of a portrait of the artist of the artist as a young man, some of whom went on to be very significant figures in Irish history, like Francis Geehee Skeffington. So please subscribe to my channel and look me up. I've got a TikTok channel going now, so check that out on Instagram, Facebook, as well as YouTube. Toodle pip.